Hi, everybody. Good evening. I am delighted to introduce Michael Lim, an art and design historian from Seoul, Korea, who will be giving a lecture titled Sculptorly Sculpture tonight. I had the pleasure of attending one of his public lectures in 2020, and I was excited by his enthusiasm for art, as well as his sincere attention and care for the challenges and uncertainties that artists encounter in their practice. Hosting Michael as our first visiting artist from Seoul is a special event, and we are grateful to the Studio Council and the BIPOC Student Union and additional support from the Sculpture Department for making this possible. I am incredibly grateful and privileged to be part of this special occasion. Before we hear from Michael, I would like to highlight some of his notable achievements. Lim is an accomplished art and design historian from Seoul, South Korea. He's a former LGBTQ activist, assistant curator of Art Sunjae Center and 동아일보 Press Museum, and editor-in-chief of major publications such as 시공 Art Publications and Art and Culture magazine. Lim has authored several books, including Off Kilter Notes from Study of Contemporary Korean Artists, SK MoMA Highlights, 350 Works from the Museum of Modern Art, Seoul, Korea, and What is Art? From the Modern to Post-Contemporary. Currently, he is working on new books such as The Post-Contemporary Twilight of Modern and Postmodern Art, New Perspective for Designers, Post-Contemporary Issues After the Death of Postmodernism, and The Methods of 20th and 21st Century Art. Without a further ado, please join me in welcoming Michael Lim to the podium.
Hello. Well, let me start. Tours Sculptory Sculptures. Well, that is the title. Hello and welcome to my presentation on the visual tactile surface of Rodin's works and the sculptural pictorial responses of modernist, postmodernist, and post-20th century artists. In addition to this, I'd like to introduce a bit of the historical background of sculptor's sculpture and efforts to overcome the outdated barriers between sculpture and painting. Firstly, this lecture presents an off-kilter perspective on modern art, which is centered around Cézanne and Rodin's legacies. We will delve into the meaning of visual tactile surfaces in Cézanne and Rodin's works and how they have inspired artists to seek out new creative methods through their viewing, thinking hands. Secondly, I will discuss the efforts of modern artists to experiment with the differences between sculpture and painting, leading to new attempts and experiments in the expanded field of art. This has led to enhanced creativity and capabilities among many artists. Lastly, I'd like to present some hypothetical perspectives and theories on today's art based on its historical background. This may provide a new vision and running space for those who seek to move away from the purgatory of undead 20th century art. I think for youngsters especially, 20th century art should die. I hope this triangulation will be able to give all of us a glimpse of a better understanding of where we are and where we are heading to. Well, as a starter, I quote some words from these two. Picasso, sculpture is the best comment that a painter can make on a painting. Sounds interesting, at least to me. Matisse, he's somewhat older than Picasso. I sculpted as a painter. I did not sculpt like a sculptor. Sculpture does not say what painting says. Painting does not say what sculpture says. They are parallel ways, but you can't confuse them. Really? Well, Matisse, Picasso. Well, this year there comes 5 different Picasso exhibitions, and well, it's time to cancel him, maybe. Unfortunately. Well, anti-visualism in modern art, the Platonic complex and overcoming omniscient perspective. The derogatory remarks made by Plato about painting, sculpture, and theater as representational arts that relied on the deceptive tricks of the eye have had a profound impact on artists' attitude towards these disciplines. This has been particularly evident in the stigma that sculptors bear as creators of idols that deceive the truth as compared to painters. But unfortunately, he remains as an idol as well by Plato. This is the interpretation of, 17th century, Plato's allegory of the cave. Well, actually, with this version, it reminds me of the TV as a stupid, idiot box. And nowadays, people are blaming, smartphone. Well, that's why youngsters are becoming, but I don't think so. The Reformation of the 15th and 16th centuries, from Savonarola to Luther, witnessed the prohibition of idols and the destruction of holy images. However, does not deter painters and sculptors from seeking out dynamic avenues to break free from the shackles of religion. It was only after the Renaissance that a modern meta consciousness began to take root. Unfortunately, he is remembered as an idol as well by Savonarola. So, the denigration of vision that is prevalent in modern and contemporary art with its multifaceted resistance and criticism of the Renaissance system of perspective, which was deemed to presuppose the eye of the transcendent, God's eye, and subsequent representational language has been accompanied by a historical mission to create a modern human form and society that is completely free from the bondage of religion. So far, Martin J. He is the best one about the issue. Downcast Eyes is the best book, I think, about the issue. Well, metacognition of pure surface and pure mass and the conditions for the establishment of modern art. Since the time of the Renaissance in Europe, artists began to perceive the surface of a painting as a pure surface, reinen Fläche, in other words, window, and the mass of a sculpture as a pure mass, reinen Masse. However, it wasn't until the late 19th century that the significance of modern perspective was critically recognized. Cézanne and Rodin were the pioneers in expressing a desire to critique the simulation model of modern perspective and the illusionism it relied on. And it wasn't until 2 generations later that a conscious art historian, Vefflin, emerged. So the window, it matters a lot in our modern tradition. And then, the linear perspective, it was considered as a kind of, God's eye, God's perspective. Because Christian people back then, truth, it belonged to God. But anyway, we, denied it so that we could, end up with the modernism. Typical, Renaissance perspective system, Peruginos. In the case, the whole set out, it's already telling the basic narrative because, the vanishing point here, it is pointing out that altar in that church. But anyway, normal people, they came to think about the first, the allegory here, Jesus giving huge key to Peter. It is talking about the power of church, the authentication. But anyway, the perspective, it is already telling the truth about the narrative in terms of the symbolism. So, well, the pure surface and the pure mass, it enabled us, to think about the simulation in different way. So, well, matter, volume, you know, especially volume, it's important still. The amount of space an object takes up or containing, that's volume. And then, well, we got to think about simulation in 3D rendering programs, X, Y, Z stuff. And also Marcel Duchamp, he was playing with pure surface. Well, there comes the window. This piece, Tim, it was a kind of statement. Well, I'm not gonna produce illusionist art anymore in the form of illusionist art. Well, Catherine Dreier was the owner of the painting. True modern art was established when artists decided to move beyond being mere craftsman artists who reproduced and imitated the world created by God and the system of truth that governed it. Well, Velflin's fundamental concepts of art history and painterly painting, sculptural sculpture. The following three outcomes are a result of the reevaluation of modern perspective since the 16th century and its critical significance, which led to the conception of the pure plane as a space for meta-examination. A. In 1915, Swiss art historian Velflin identified the qualitative shift in 16th and 17th century art in his book, Principles of Art History. Well, he was the first one who could explain how that shift could be happen. Well, B, Panofsky's perspective as symbolic form. Panofsky is somewhat younger than Velflin. Well, in that book, Panofsky provided a more comprehensive understanding of the historical significance of modern perspective and its mechanics. 3, C, the Museum of Modern Art inaugural exhibition in New York in 1929, curated by Alfred Bott Jr., established the exhibition grammar of the white cube, rethinking European modern art and presenting the progress of modern art from an American Jewish perspective. Velflin, Panofsky, and Alfred Bott Jr. This shift sparked a larger wave of modernism and led to achievements in post-war modern art worldwide. The white cube represents the pure surface in painting, the pure mass in sculpture. The avant-gardes that emerged in North America as the new modern art corresponding to the white cube were FX, color field, and minimalism. However, the white cube was not fully established as an exhibition grammar in European art scene between the two great wars. The first to show, Cézanne, Gauguin, Seurat, Van Gogh. So, Alfred Bott Jr., he was a lot influenced by the Felix Fénéon, who started the, neo-impressionism thing. So, in the middle, you can see Seurat. And then, in the year 1936, he handed out this legendary diagram with the exhibition, Cubism and Abstract Art. So, over there, Seurat, Neo-Impressionism, this model, it's the basic form for Alfred Bott Jr. to interpret other modern art movements, like here, Dada and Surrealism. Well, Dada, it was kind of, a response to the First World War. And then, André Breton, he put out, some, new ideas from Freudian stuff. And then, there comes the second form, surrealism. And that kind of transformation always, that happens in modern and contemporary arts. And then, still we are stuck on that idea. So I think, it's time for us to overcome that. But, Virgil Abloh, he also took that idea as well. Well, he was somewhat down to earth. So, 6 contemporary art and not 7, 6A. And then he handed out streetwear as a kind of post-contemporary art. So basically, it's from a Renaissance to Baroque. So, he considered himself as a kind of, new Caravaggio. He said, I took an art history class in my 5th year of engineering. I learned about the Italian Renaissance and Caravaggio, and it rewired my brain. So, he took that transformation kind of thing, shift, from this as well. Veltlin introduced 5 antitheses to explain the qualitative shifts in the development of Western European art in the 16th and 17th centuries. These are linear art versus painterly art, plane versus recession, closed form versus open form, multiplicity versus unity, and absolute clarity versus relative clarity, along with the concept of malerisch proposed by Veltlin. A meta-awareness of painterly painting and its lineage has emerged. However, in the history of modern art, it has been repositioned to emphasize a sense of flatness, picture plane. The painterly painting of Veltlin emphasizes depth, unlike modern and contemporary art, which emphasizes the physicality of the paint, the haptic trajectory of the brushstrokes, and the layers that result from it. You all know this, so I'll skip. Linear versus painterly. But unfortunately, Veltlin, he used the same term for sculptors. Plane versus recession. Closed and open form. So the architectural form, it comes first, and then later figures, they had to play out as kind of, door play. But anyway, Baroque system, it's more open. Veltlin, he applied that, reasoning system to portraits as well. Multiplicity in terms of narrative, unity. And he thought, same things happening in the portraitures as well. Absolute and, relative clarity. God's eye, it should have all the things all together. So in the Renaissance paintings, everything's in focus. But the Baroque system is different. On the right side, Velázquez, you can see the, relative clarity. So Velázquez, in this kind of case, you can see one of those painterly, brush strokes. So that's why he used very long brushes. Actually, he used like this. So, right in front of the canvas, you can see the, the whole, gestural things. But anyway, that happens in the sculptures as well. Bernini's, here you can see brush strokes like, the expression is totally different from, Renaissance stuff. Baroque, 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 Baroque. So crazy. Renaissance, so modest. Modest. Basically, the relationship between the sculpture and the space is totally different. You can feel that. The roots of modern painterliness stretch back to artists such as Titian, El Greco, Rubens, Velasquez, and Rembrandt. In contrast, the same cannot be said for sculptorly sculpture. This raises questions as to why this idea has not been fully articulated. Veuve described the sculpture with the term painterly instead of built halarish, which may have failed to grasp the nuances of the medium, or he may have overlooked the epistemological differences between stone wood carving and clay modeling or lost wax bronze casting, which allow for delicate modifications. These are questions worth exploring in the context of understanding the rich history of art. Sculpture by omniscient viewpoint since the Renaissance. The technique of working with wax models rather than drawing as a designer or designing has been employed numerous sculptors and painters throughout history, including renowned figures such as Michelangelo, Perugino, and Del Sarto. Typical designer, Da Vinci's. But, wax modello, it tells more about how they processed the whole thing. Poussin wax models reconstructed by Met People in 2021. This is the basic setting. So, Poussin and even David, they can, take some scenes this way or that way, like, a filmmaker. Throughout history, there have been many instances where painting and sculpture have influenced each other, leading to the merging of their receptive vocabularies. Even in Korea, in Joseon Dynasty, we can see the case of Mokgakteng style. It's from the painting. This is the one. It's from the paintings. You can see that. This tradition, 16th century, and then all of a sudden, 17th century, it is becoming in the 3D format. According to Vasari's Vitae, Michelangelo simulated an object from the omniscient point of view of the creator by placing his model assistant in a container of water and watching the process of water draining out. When working on his series of slaves, he made a wax modello of a slave, put it in water, and repeated the process to avoid making mistakes when chiseling stones, because marble, it's expensive one. This is wax modello of a slave by Michelangelo. And the result. So, in Vitae, if we only took the text and then, we can maybe misunderstand the text as a kind of, allegory. But actually, Michelangelo, he sculpted somewhat like a robot. It looked like this man is in his own bathtub. He was getting rid of the result one by one, layer by layer. So it is showing the true power of Michelangelo. His simulation power it's amazing. He was it's crazy, I think. But anyway, in his later days, he lost his ability. After traveling to Italy with a bit of success, Rodin meta thought about this simulation of Michelangelo's omniscient gaze and subsequent examples of sculptural creation implementing in distinctness into the mass and seeking on an omniscious unifying force. Only then was he able to set out on a path that dealt not with the truth of God, but with the truth of man himself. So Rodin was also a sculptor of the, well, I'd like to point out that, he was using the pantograph. Rodin focused on working with clay, as pantographs allowed him to enlarge small pieces and reduce large ones with precision. Well, in the era of deep learning algorithms and 3D scan, print, and sculpt, how should today's sculptors who ought to reinvent their identity as post-contemporary artists work? Pantograph. And nowadays, in Italy, old school craftsmen people, they are using this kind of new techniques as well. Cézanne's hesitantly overlapping brush strokes, fumbling towards the painter's truth. In a missive to Bernard on April 5th, 1904, Cézanne declared that everything in nature is modeled after the sphere, the cylinder, and the cone. It sounds pretty much like Plato. He contended that his paintings did not center on the subject, but on the truth between the subject and himself, which existed solely in the painter's mind. So, he was the pioneer of two eyes thing, not only in a single eye view. Emma Bernard. In 1904, Bernard summoned the courage to visit Cézanne in Provence. Despite the irascible artist's personality, Cézanne warmly welcomed this beautiful young man, and they engaged in earnest discussions. During the dinner, Bernard, inquired if Cézanne ever felt lonely or apprehensive about great failure. And then all of a sudden, Cézanne stood up, clutched his chest, and was unable to utter a word. His eyes welled with tears. Later, the philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty probed this episode deeply in his legendary article, Cézanne's Doubt. Later years, Cézanne. So, his achievements all started with his still lifes because, they don't go away. So his brushstrokes, it was so slow. So, he couldn't go with human figures. And he also, he understood the landscape paintings as a kind of, still lifes. 1888 piece, Avenue at Chantilly. 10 years later, it tells a lot about his brushstrokes. I love those. And Cézanne, he is a really bad painter, actually. Ambroise Vollard, he sit as a model for 115 times, but unfortunately, Cézanne, he could not finish it. It's really a legendary piece. And also, Cézanne's his perceptive way of painting, it could be, read more precisely with these kind of, watercolor pieces. Later years. And there comes the last one, Grand Baignou, unfinished one. This piece, it was publicly exhibited in the year 1907. And the younger generation, they were so, obsessive about, and then, they competed to each other to get the legacy. Who is the follower of the true follower of Cézanne? And then, on the first hand, on Matisse, and then Picasso and Kandinsky came in. They dissed each other. In 1855, Rodin, a student of Petite École, was fascinated by clay and decided to become a sculptor. So now I'm talking about Rodin's moving surface, skin, groping for the sculptor's truth. So, well, in this relation, uh, Rodin and Cezanne, well, they are sharing some kind of, very important, features, I think. While at the school, he saw students working on plaster molds and he was hooked. I saw clay for the first time, he recalls. I felt like I was rising to the sky. I made the arms, the head, the legs, each part separately. And then I threw myself into the creation of the whole figure. Everything made sense, and I did it as skillfully as I do now. Really? But anyway, well, he was in a trance. Auguste Rodin and his sister. Petit École, their studio. After completing his 3-year course at the Petit École in 1857, the boy's talent as a sculptor had to be recognized by his father. After some family arguments, Rodin was given the opportunity to show his work to the master, Hippolyte Mandron, for evaluation. Mandron told him that he had the talent and that, he should hone his skills at Beaux-Arts. Undaunted, the boy applies to the Beaux-Arts, the national school, but fails the entrance exam 3 times. Mandron, struggling as a decorative sculptor, Rodin, labor class he was, he entered the Paris Salon in 1875 with a bust version of Man with a Broken Nose. Well, Rodin's desire to study grew, and he traveled to Italy with only 700 francs. Traveling through Italy, he encounters ancient architecture and sculpture, and it is inspired by Michelangelo's sculptures. Well, his work on architectural decorative sculpture projects was not free of neoclassical tendencies. Rodin's stay in Italy from 1875 to 77 gave him a meta-awareness of reinterpreted ancient sculpture and the history of sculpture since the Renaissance, and he would go on to become an independent artist with autonomy. Particularly inspiring to him were the unfinished works of Michelangelo. Well, this version took to the prize of Salon because, it is not made by Rodin. It is carved by his friend. So, the tone, it was pretty much down for the Salon's, old school virtue or ethics. Therefore, it is hardly a coincidence that Rodin's 1877 exhibition of the Age of Bronze, the Age of Bronze, or life-size sculpture, was criticized for life casting, as you know. People were repulsed and misunderstood because it was the result of sculpting a normal human body, not an idealized one. He preferred to use ordinary people as models and make them to this and that. In the case of the Age of Bronze, the model was a Belgian soldier. Rodin subsequently shunned the idea of creating a life-sized work after. Well, this is the one, the model, bronze version. At a time of epistemological differences over how sculpture should be understood, Rodin's only life-size sculpture, the Bronze Age, caused a great deal of controversy and later became a historical milestone. Awarded the Légion d'honneur in 1887, Rodin gradually established himself as a major artist, and the Arma Pavilion, which summarizes his achievements of the 1890s was the pinnacle of his artistic career. Ama Pavilion, the poster, model at Myeodong, artist himself at the pavilion, 1900. What was special about the exhibition was that it displayed plaster casts that were considered unfinished rather than works that had been finished by, well, bronze casting, drawing attention to the artist's process itself. In particular, in the case of the Gates of Hell, by displaying the gates as an empty backdrop without assembling and installing the initially completed reliefs, the exhibition received both criticism for being still unfinished and for displaying the space and time that the artist was pursuing. Well, Myeodong and the original Ama Pavilion, you can see that, well, there's no thinker. Musée d'Orsay version. As you know, it is from the Ghiberti as well, the Gates of Heaven, the first decennium. The first, well, clay model, developing process. Some people believe that the reason of the reliefs were not assembled and installed was due to Bruegel's unspoken criticism. That refers to an incident in which Bruegel hung his head on a high relief in the Gates of Hell. After this incident, anyway, Rodin stopped working on. Well, in Korea there was Rodin Gallery. And then, this is before the Assam it's in the middle of the process of installation of the plaster model at Ama Pavilion. This is the Korean version. The glass pavilion, it was an homage to the Ama Pavilion. Actually, at the opening of Rodin Gallery in Korea, Rodin Gallery's director from Paris, he handed out an allegory, which was talking about the South Great Gate in Seoul and the Gates of Hell. Maybe that's why it burned like hell. Rodin on the gates. Shining the light of analysis on Rodin's work was the poet Rilke. Rilke worked as Rodin's secretary from September 15th, 1905 to May 12th, 1906, though he was unfortunately dismissed at Rodin's whim. Because Rodin was from, labor class, sometimes he made some kind of, wrong sentences. And whenever his secretaries are trying to, fix it, and then you're fired. Rilke and Rodin. Rodin, his art world was really well interpreted by Rilke's criticism. Some quotations from Rilke's writings. Here goes. Eventually, his research turned to the surface of the body, which is made up of an infinite number of encounters between matter and light, and he found that each of these encounters was different and unique. Don't you think it's somewhat like, impressionist kind of thing? For Rodin, the involvement of the atmosphere was always very important. I think so. And also at the Steichen's photograph, it was telling about the atmosphere. One more at the Steichen's photo of Rodin. At Steichen, admiring Rodin's piece at MoMA. What does it even mean to make a surface? Moving surface. Moving surface. There is only one surface that exists, one surface that moves and changes in 1,000 ways. Moving surface. The creator's hand and the creature. Now I must say something about movements. The slopes of the surface change in many ways so that the light flows slowly in some places and falls quickly in others, sometimes shallow and sometimes deep, sometimes mirror-like and sometimes hazy. The secret? There is a cylinder. Rodin's creator's hand. As he continues to explore the themes of the contact of living and moving planes, he finds flesh meeting flesh at various points. Flesh that is in greater, stronger, more violent contact. It is same with the Cezanne's legacy. Well, one of the factors associated with Rodin's fluctuating surfaces is his career as a porcelain sculptor. He worked at the Sèvres porcelain workshop, assisting his old friend Garnier Belus from 1879 to 1882. His porcelain sculptures show the beginnings of what would become a full-fledged painterly, sculptorly practices. Here comes. Unfortunately, there is no catalog raisonné of Rodin's porcelain pieces. I love them. During the creation of the Gates of Hell, Rodin kept a collection of individually made models of heads, legs, arms, and hands in a drawer in his studio. These are carved pieces the artist fondly referred as abatis, organs or appendices. When used in the plural, abatis means it's human body. In the case, it could actually in his studio the whole scene it looked like a serial killer's studio. It's pretty much interesting, I think. Limbs. So that he could try some kind of the first format of assemblage, he was playing with his abatis, those heads are from the Calais civilians. The angel is embracing. His funeral. Okay, it's time for the list up. Intriguing cases of sculptural sculptures or meta sculptures. Scene 1, Rodin's Arma Pavilion. It's kind of installation art, I think. Well, there's a porter, and then, these little things, it's talking to each other. They are talking to each other, I think. 22 years old Rodin made the first version of this broken nose. First plaster version. And interestingly, 22 years old Picasso, he took that idea into his own terms. Picador with broken nose. Scene 2, Picasso's apple. In 1909, Picasso created a plaster sculpture of Cézanne's apple. 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 Cézanne's apple. There comes, analytical, things. Scene 3, Matisse's Back series. Between the spring of 1908 and 1931, Matisse reinterpreted Cézanne's bathers, creating back series. Well, this sculpture influenced Picasso's thickly sculptural human bodies of the neoclassical period. Back series at MoMA, so thick, so thick. And they are from the, Grand Baignou, Cézanne's paintings. Scene 4. Unique Forms of Continuity in Space by Boccioni, 1913 piece. This one. I think it's from that Cézanne's bathers as well. Scene 5, Giacometti's studio. Giacometti took up residence at the studio Hippolyte Mandron, in the year 1926. His sculpture work is known for its distinctive, elongated human forms that express the existential condition of modern man. So, I think the studio itself is the greatest achievement. Scene 6, Henry Moore, recumbent figure. Henry Moore presented a modern abstract mass with ancient figurative qualities, drawing on classical themes and forms in art. This sculpture shares a common denominator with the surrealist abstract language of Juan Miró. Scene 7, Calder's Dancer. Calder produced sculptural mobiles and stables as well in bronze between 1930 and 1943 to 44. His works were inspired by Miro as well, Miro's cosmic abstract paintings, and were characterized by their playfulness. Thick mobiles. Unfortunately, they were not so popular, so he gave it up. But I really want to see them in a bigger format. Scene 8, Quarantania by Louis Bourgeois. Louis Bourgeois created a series of early sculptures between the late 40s and early 50s, which were categorized as surrealist or epics at the time. Oh, she created modern totems in the form of columns. By the 1970s, these figures were reinvented as extended sculptures, revealing the artist contending with the father figure. Quarantania. The subject of pain is the business I'm in. Scene 9, Picasso's Bull. From the late 50s onwards, Picasso produced and presented sculptures inspired by Matisse's cutout series. In 1990, François Gillot published Matisse and Picasso, in which she rated Matisse more highly than her ex-husband Picasso. I love that. Picasso's, sculptures are telling about, all the painters should try some modeling stuff in 3D form. Scene 10, The Store by Oldenburg. My single-minded aim is to give existence to my fantasy. It sounds like surrealism. The critical moment is my act of seeing. The rest is the patient reconstruction of this hallucination and successive hallucinations which arise in the course of making. Experience is the primary material, and then plaster and paint. The content is always the human imagination. Here's doors. Scene 11, de Kooning's Seated Woman. Ex-pioneer, de Kooning initially crafted a collection of 13 little bronze sculptures, echoing his own women's series in 1969. He later embarked on a larger scale sculpture inspired by the series in 1970, following a suggestion by Moore, but it took him until 1980 to finish it. Crazy stuff. Sculptors cannot make this kind of thing. This too much like, I don't want to use the word, but this shitty kind of thing, it never happens among Sculptors League. It's definitely, it literally looks like some shit, right? I love them. Ellipses. Let's skip in about the era of installation art, which dealt with site specificity. So here comes scene 16-1. Sarah Ultimate by David Ultimate. When the artist emailed his sister, for a portrait to use in, his talk, he jokingly sent, his sister sent him a maternity photo, the image with, the niece's head emerging from the opening. So it was pretty much, graphic. Initially, he asked for a normal photo and was sent a wedding snapshot, but the maternity photo was the perfect image for his work. So, he and his sister talked about showing it in the lecture, even got permission, but ultimately the artist decided not to use it in his lecture because the image of his work couldn't beat the maternity photo. True creation and the artist's creation. This is the piece. There's a hole, black hole. And so, David Ultimate, he's from actually, his parents from the Poland. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, anti-Semitism, it was kind of big thing. And then, all the members of the town, they came to David Ultimate's house and his parents' house. And then they said, it's time for you guys to leave. So they immigrated to Canada. And then, David Ultimate, as a little boy, he was isolated. So, he developed his own language with his own thinking hands. Scene 16-2, Sketch for a Fountain by Nicole Eisenman. After a brief slump, she jumped into sculpting, which she had resumed in 2011. As you know, she is well-known. She was a well-known zombie formalist painter. In earnest around 2015, and then hit a new real peak in 2016 to 17. With the sculpture going well, she made progress on the paintings that were falling apart. This is a kind of masterpiece, I think. Nicole Eisenman's Sketch for a Fountain. So many people were there, so the grass is gone. Those painfully strokes with clay, they are amazing, I think. Scene 17-1, Rumors of War by Kahinde Wiley. This piece, Scene 17-2, Fons Americanus by Cara Walker. Cara Walker, an acclaimed African-American artist, was awarded the Tate's prestigious 2019 Hyundai Commission for the Turbine Hall, and her approach was deemed more captivating that of Kahinde Wiley's Rumors of War, both of whom are renowned for their post-colonial critics. Drawing inspiration from the Queen Victoria Memorial Fountain in front of Buckingham Palace, Walker delves into artistry to create Fons Americanus, a monumental fountain sculpture infused with political and social commentary depicting the plight of Black people who have suffered throughout history due to racism. Well, in creating this grandiose satire, Kara Walker, who primarily works as a painter, utilized 3D scanning to recreate small pieces, which were then printed out in 3D and retouched to give the sculpture a sculptural feel. It's kind of, a trick. Well, sculptors, would not do that. But anyway, she is a painter, so she could try that kind of new things. The result was amazing. The comparison. And the boy. Scene 18. Sovereignty by Simon Lee. Simon Lee's ceramic sculptures, which confront issues of racism, misogyny, homophobia, and xenophobia, were featured at the US Pavilion of the Venice Biennale last year. The sculptures were inspired by historical objects such as the judo ceremonial, ladle, like, a wakemia. Well, Simon Lee's receipt of the Golden Lion, or Without a Smile, was a significant moment in the symbolic contestation of racist modern art, reminiscent of past exhibitions such as African Negro art and primitivism in 20th century art, affinity of the tribal and the modern. The US Pavilion. Here comes the references. Back then, Oscar Wilde, when he toured around in the US continent, some people made this kind of satire, racist satire, as an ape. Oscar Wilde as an African American man. And the other reference was the face jog and the racist photo. So Simon Lee's, clay sculptures, it was a kind of, great response to the dark side of modernism. And it was all really well, supported by the curator Cecilia Alemani. The clay model. No smile. In light of this victory, the Met opened an exhibition entitled Hear My Voice Now, The Black Porters of Old Edgefield, South Carolina, which showcases Dave Drake's stoneware jars and the hidden history of African Americans. Drake's 1857 jar with the inscription, I wonder where is all my relation, friendship to all in every nation. Well, this exhibition, it was truly groundbreaking one, I think. The inscription. In later days of David Drake, he lost his leg. Possibly, it was, his master, sold him to a new one, and then the new owner, he was somewhat more conservative, so he asked Dave Drake not to sign on your porcelain. Don't write any poems, but anyway, Dave Drake, he kept on, and then, he lost his leg. Scene 19, sculptural impulses, the Korean responses to the contemporary situation. or post-contemporary situation. Sculptural Impulse was a problematic exhibition by SEMA, which brought together 17 young sculptors of the post-contemporary era, focusing on a series of sculptural and creative methods and processes that have been reinvented in the new space and time of the 1910s. It was a survey and curatorial exhibition that should have been held at any museum. While the museum's press release emphasizes making as a part of the SEMA's 2022 institutional agenda, and Kwon Hye-in, the in-house curator, suggested the exhibition Resistance to the Sculptural 2009 exhibition at the same institution. As a precedent, the exhibition was actually, though, designed to ask and answer the question, why, how did today's artists reinvent sculpting practices through their identity as sculptors? The poster, the gate, and there comes a Korean reinterpretation version of Gates of Hell. Moon Ishak, The Gates of Hell. Actually, those about this from his former works. 오재성, 최하늘, 이동훈. Actually, he was a painter, but he couldn't get away with his old school academic painting stuffs. So he, all of a sudden, he sculpted out his own supports, and then, his paintings was becoming a kind of sculptures like these. And these are dealing with the K-pop dances. Kim Judy, she started with the models, clay models of, poor people's housing in Korea, and then she destroyed them, and then she made this pile of clay. Jung Ji-han, he traces out the surfaces from Korea. In Korea, actually, you can see so many ugly public sculptures. He's trying to make a comment on them. Kwak In-tan. The exhibition Sculptural Impulse could be framed by a single question. At a time when artists may work without obligation to medium, why choose the materials of sculpture? What does it mean for an artist to assume the role of sculptor today? And just what is at stake for a new generation committed to sculpture? Actually, the text, it's a variation on the agenda set forth by curators Eric Crosby and Bartholomew Ryan in their 2013 exhibition, Painter, Painter at Woco Art Center. In the era of deep learning algorithms and 3D scan, print, and sculpt, post-contemporary sculptors must reinvent their profession and practices all at once. Kwak In-tan's pieces, is trying to start some kind of self-referential stuff. Recent works, pedestal piece, and references. Rodin's Gates of Hell, and Korean minimalist Ha Jong-yeon, and Kim Hwan-gi, the founder of Korean abstract art movement. In an era where the existence of things is fading away, amid the pandemic, rapid advancements in digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, the shift towards digital environments, and the integration of analog and digital environments have gained momentum. Although the art world is no exception to these changes, discussions surrounding the impact of digital technology on art are scarce. I recommend that those in the art world read Undinge, a book by Korean philosopher in Germany, Han Byung-chul. In this book, Han critiques the era where digital information has become the new original. Analog objects have started to be considered manifestations, and the existence of things has faded, using the keywords dinge and undinge. Undinge is about the loss of this magic. The digital order objectifies the world by rendering it information, he writes. It's not objects, but information that rules the living world. We no longer inhabit heaven and earth, but the cloud and Google Earth. The world is becoming progressively untouchable, foggy, and ghostly. Undinge, absurdity, nonsense. Dinge, thing, object, existence. Korean version. And Han Byung-chul, he was given a lecture at Mohoinaze University of Art and Design last year. Han argues that the digital order makes information the ruler of the living world and renders the world de-objectified, leaving us with a ghostly, untouchable world where nothing is tangible. Without physical contact, bonding is impossible, and digital communication accelerates the disappearance of the other. So, well, back in the old contemporary art scene, well, in my generation, we were talking about the otherness, it mattered, but it's bygone era's theme, I think. Leaving only ghosts behind in a world of sameness. Post-contemporary art must critically reevaluate the way art exists by exploring the core of these changes. Recovering our presence is essential to free space and time from the digital fog. Therefore, I believe that tomorrow's agenda should be visual-tactile art or visual-tactile space embodied with newer perspective. And the attainment of visual-tactile transcendence may prove to be an essential means of regaining a sense of presence or existential being, particularly in the context of combating the effects of Undinge. So touching is really important, I think. Actually, all the owners of beautiful sculptures, they are always touching. Even painters, they are touching their own paintings. Larry Pittman. Thank you for your patience, your attentive listening. I would also like to express my gratitude to the young artist who kindly invited me to speak. Thank you so much.